Okay, Boker Tov and Shavua Tov. I would like to begin today's shiur with a story that is recorded in the responsa of the Rivash. This is Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Sheshet Perfet, and it tells a story from, we can only guess that from around 1400. So in the year 1400, a ship comes, a boat, a big boat, comes to North Africa or to Algiers with 45 people on board. And these people on board are from the Anusim. So in Hebrew, they would be called Anusim, and in Spanish, they may be called conversos or new Christians or crypto Jews or Maranos. All of these words are used for the same group of people, but you can understand from the variety of nicknames that there are very different groups, subgroups within this group, and there are very different attitudes towards these people. So 45 people coming in a ship, 1400, from Miurka, from Valencia, from Barcelona, and they want to come to the shore at Algiers and just settle in the city where the Rivash is. And the Rivash tells us that in the beginning, there is an opposition. The local Muslim population tries to prevent the Jews or conversos or new Christians or etc. from coming down. Why? They say they would take our jobs, they would take our salaries. But the governor would not heed to them. Reason is that the Jews pay twice the tax for Muslims. So he is all in favor for the new Jews to take the jobs because that would mean more income tax for him. So as they see that they are in a problem, they go to the local Qadi, meaning that is the religious authority for the Muslims. So they go to him and they tell him, we do not want the Jews coming in, they will take our living. And he says to them, if you were real believers, then you would have known that everything is from Allah, and there would nothing be taken from you by the Jews coming in. Very interesting answer. And then, so everything seems that would eventually play good for these poor Jews that are coming from Spain and that were converted forcibly to Christianity several years before. However, a surprise obstacle suddenly arises, and that is that in the Jewish community, there are voices opposing the coming of these poor 45 people. They want the ship to be blocked and return to Spain, where these people may very soon find themselves in very bad situation. Now, why is that? The Rivash does not give us the reason why there are people in the Jewish community that oppose the coming in of these crypto Jews. We can only assume, he hints that maybe the Jews that oppose also do it for monetary reasons. They are also afraid that these newcomers would take their jobs and positions. But it doesn't say it out loud, it doesn't say it clearly, and we may imagine other reasons why they would oppose. Maybe they oppose the coming of these people because they think that they are betrayers. They are people that betrayed the faith. Many of the Jews in North Africa in the 1400s, in certain places, are people that decided to leave Spain, to leave everything behind in order not to be forced into Christianity. And now, 6, 7 years later, come these people. Maybe they were able to get some of their belongings because they played along with Christianity. And now you come here. If you didn't come with us in the beginning, then you can stay there. Be it as it may, the Rivash, who himself was from Spain, And according to some of the historians, according to Christian historians from the time, maybe he himself was forcibly converted to Christianity, or at least some holy water were splashed on him, with or without his consent. He himself also stands there in Algiers, and he stands in the shul, and he says that everyone that would try to prevent these Jews from landing would be excommunicated. Now, this declaration almost cost him his position, because there were some people very important in the community that were not happy with this decision. They went to the king of Algiers, and he was able, very thinly, he was able to escape. However, from this story, we can see how not simple was the re-entrance of the conversos back into the Jewish people, and that is only 7 or 8 years after the first wave of forced conversions. Because here we need very, very quickly to go over a very short history survey of the forced conversions in the Iberian Peninsula. So again, we do not have any time. We can very easily enjoy a whole course, 7, 8, 9 lectures, shiurim, on these questions alone of how did the forced conversions came to be. But we are not interested today in this topic. We are interested in how they were able, when they were able, and where they were willing to re-enter. So we speak about 3 major waves of forced conversion. One is in 1391. In Hebrew, they call it Praot El-Kana, Kuf Nun Aleph. Kuf Nun Aleph is the Hebrew year of 1391. Now, in 1391, there were mobs. So this is pogrom, and then forced conversions that do not come from the king. As a matter of fact, the king is trying to save the Jews, but he was very weak at the time. So the masses, the Christian masses, they attack the Jews. It's very difficult to obtain certain numbers, but we know for sure that thousands, at least thousands, are being slaughtered. And it seems that about 100,000 Jews in Spain are being converted under a certain measure of threats. It's very difficult to know. Sometimes people would be afraid of the masses of the pogromers coming in, so they would convert even before they would come in. So it's not always that people were dragged into the conversion, but sometimes they did. So again, it's very difficult to ascertain, and we can read, there are horrifying testimonies that can be read, but again, that's not our topic for today. So that was in 1391, and at least 100,000. Some historians speak about 200,000, a very large number. Now, according to the formal policy of the church in Spain, as it was adopted, then basically you are not supposed to force someone into conversion, but if you did, it takes place, it holds, and then there is no way back. You cannot return, you cannot undo the deal. There are no 14 days in which you can check out. So in the minute that you were converted, even if against your will, then now you are, according to the church, you're a Christian, and you must follow Christian practices. And if you do not, then you are a heretic, and your punishment would be accordingly. So that is in 1391, and it goes in more or less, meaning there are mobs, and then there are no mobs, and then there's again mobs, more or less to 1415. So we usually see all the period between 1391 to 1414 or 1415 as one big wave of conversions, forced conversions. And of course, murder and rape and everything you want or do not want. then there is some time of rest. However, the church understands that there is no way that the new Christians, the conversos, would remain Christian or would become Christian if they continue to live with the relatives that did not convert. Because you understand, when there is a mob conversion, then it's all up to incidents. It may be that there are two brothers of the same family. One went in this side of the street and the other in that side of the street. One brother was taken and converted against his will, and the other was not. So now you have a family of two brothers. One is still Jewish and one is not. It may be that the husband was caught and the wife was not, or vice versa. And it would not be practical to really be able to re-educate the new Christians as Christians as long as their relatives are still trying to Judaize them. And so, again, we are skipping a lot of history here, but the second wave is the most known one in 1492. In 1492, the king and the queen of Spain that now were able to complete the reconquest of the whole of Spain from the Muslim from the Muslims who controlled Spain for hundreds of years, they decide to celebrate their liberation of Spain by making it Judenrein, also Muslim Rhine, but for our purposes, Judenrein. So they gave all the Jews a few months in order to make their mind. They can either convert to Christianity or they can leave. These are their only two options. Now, as you can understand, it's not so simple to leave everything behind. I don't think that that's something that needs to be told. Even in our day and age, in which you have planes and you have hospitals and you have everything, but speaking back then, and there is no place in the world that says, please come in. You are a Jew. No one really wants you. There is no home for you. So things are extremely complicated. Again, we do not have exact numbers, but it is estimated that about 50,000 Jews leave Spain and about 100,000 convert. So all in these 100 years, between 1391 to 1492, again, around, these are very, very round numbers. It may be that it was 270, it maybe that it was 170. It's very difficult to give numbers, but around 200,000 Jews are converted, again, in different levels of force. The majority was not interested in converting. There may be a few here and there, but the overwhelming majority was forced. Now, again, what does it mean to be forced? If you are given the opportunity not to die or to convert, but to live or to convert, do you see it as forced or you do not see it as forced? I'm not answering this question, and I don't think we are in any shape or form to judge these people for their decisions. I only think that these are questions that need to be thought. The third wave is of the people that did leave Spain, but they didn't went far enough. And you can maybe, as just some far away equation, you can think about the Jews running away from Hitler, but they are running just to the western side of Russia, or to, if you want, the eastern side of Poland. And they think that if they stay there, they are safe from Nazi Germany. Until, of course, 1941. So in the same way, there are Jews running away from Spain to Portugal. And that seems to be a very easy solution because it's the same place, still the Iberian Peninsula. It's more or less the same language. I ask for the pardon of those that are very sharp about the differences in these languages, but it's not so far away. And the culture, you may say, is also not very different. So it's not such a hard relocation. So many Jews who didn't want to convert were willing to pay a high price and leave their homes. Some of them, they lived in Spain for 1,000 years. We have testimonies of Jews in Spain for at least from the 300s. So for 1,000 years, you know that in some way you can say that the most ancient group that we can identify in Spain were the Jews. The Christians, again, of course, they were habitats, they were indigenous people of Spain. But the Christians came from Europe, the Visigoths, others. And the Muslims obviously came from North Africa. So the people that you can trace back, the most pure Spanish people, in a sense, were the Jews. Anyhow, of course, it didn't help them. So they left. And they left to Portugal. And the king of Portugal solemnly promised them that they were able to practice their religion freely, or at least as freely as in the medieval times it was considered to be fair. And 5 years later, 5 years, not 205, 5 years later, the king decides that he wants maybe to merge his kingdom with Spain, again, for political reasons that we cannot go into right now. And if he wants to merge his kingdom with Spain, then he needs to have the same rules as Spain. If Spain has no heretics in its fields, then the same must be true for Portugal. Now, he is not willing to let the Jews go because they are strong and important engines of his economy. So he does not give them even the option. He first jailed them in a quarter, and then he says to them, from now on, you are all Christians. So no real choice is even if you want to be Moser HaNefesh, well, I guess that someone can just kill himself. But a part of that, they are just, from now on, know that you are Christians. And give them a certain date from which the Inquisition would begin to act and check that really no one is Judaizing. Okay, so that's the third wave that in a sense is the most tragic. Why? Because these are people that were willing to leave Spain in order to keep the faith. And now they were against their will and against any way in which they were able to free themselves, they are now also becoming, at least formally, Christians. So these are the three big waves. As I said, it's very difficult to give numbers, but we speak about around 200,000 in Spain and a few more dozen thousand. So again, I'm throwing numbers, but 30,000, let's say, in Portugal. We end up around 250,000. These are big numbers, very big numbers of Jews that are now considered by the state as not exactly Christians, but also not Jews anymore. So they are, again, new Christians or conversos, or maybe they are crypto-Jews. That's how the Inquisition, so more or less all of them. And the whole thing was, in a way, was a contradiction that you couldn't run away from. You were suspected as a crypto-Jew, regardless of what would you do. And then every behavior that would be seen as maybe you'd clean the house on Friday. That was enough in some places and sometimes to be put to death in fire, in what they call the auto de fe, the act of faith. Just cleaning your house on Friday. I'm not speaking about trying to eat matzah on something that is even similar to Pesach. So that's the situation that people found themselves. Now, on one hand, as I said earlier, I don't see myself, or I don't think that we are in a position to judge anyone who made this decision that way or the other. The judgment is for God. However, we must understand that this situation in which, as I said, more than 200,000 Jews decided that they would convert and not die and would not leave Spain, that was considered an extreme failure of Spanish Jewry. And for hundreds of years later, the people that would see themselves as the descendants, not only of those that converted, but also of those that left, they would ask themselves, how did we fail the test so miserably? In order to understand why there was this fears of guilt, then we need to look at the big Jewish center, just next door, geographically, to Spain, and that is, of course, Ashkenaz. So it will be Germany and French. And a few hundred years earlier to the Spanish forced conversions, there were the Crusades, the Masaot Hatzlav, or they call it in Hebrew, Gzeirot Tatnu. And around the year 1000, the Christians decided that they would go and conquer the Holy Land. So they would be able to throw away the heretics, the Muslim heretics that are in control of the Holy Land. However, as they were walking towards the Holy Land, they had a beautiful idea. Why should we go to fight so far away heretics if we have heretics just next door, right? We have all the Jews here. So first take care of your own garden and then go to take care of others. And they attack. And again, slaughter, rape, everything under the sun was done in the Crusades, and try to force the Jews of Ashkenaz to convert. However, the Jews of Ashkenaz reacted very differently from the Jews of Spain hundreds of years later. And we do not have numbers. Everything, we don't have numbers. But it seems very clear from the accounts that there were only few that failed the test of faith. And most of them, not only that they are willing to be killed, but at least some of them, it seems from some of the responsive literature, it was even common. They were willing to kill each other, to kill their own children, to kill their wives, in order for them not to fall into the hands of the Crusaders. So that was what you can compare. And when the Spanish Jews, or what was left of them, were comparing these two populations, they were asking themselves, why did they stand the task, and why did we fail it? Now, the background is the halacha that I brought here in source bet from the Rambam in Hilchot Yesodei Torah. So it's written here, but it's more or less an accepted halacha all over the line. So source bet says the Rambam, Bishat HaGzeira. So when there is a decree, והוא שיעמוד מלך רשע כנבוכדנצר וחבריו. So there is a wicked king, such as Nebuchadnezzar or his friends, his fellows. ויגזור גזירה על ישראל לבטל דתם. And you decree against עם ישראל to try to cancel their faith, to crush their faith. או מצווה מן המצוות, or even one mitzvah, if it is come from above as an effort to destroy the Jewish religion. יהרג ואל יעבור. In such a case, one should be willing to be killed and not to let the king to be able to חס וחלילה destroy the Jewish faith. אף על פי כן, however, says Rambam, although you are expected to give your life for your faith, מפני שעבר באונס, if someone did fail this test, אין מלקים אותו, we do not punish him, ואין צריך לומר שאין ממיתים אותו, we do not kill him, although he worshipped idols. So basically the punishment for worshipping idols is death. If someone did it because he was forced, even that we expected him not to be tempted, nonetheless he is not being punished. And he says, even HaKadosh Baruch Hu does not punish if you were forced. However, now I'm almost in the last line here, אבל אם יכול למלט נפשו, all of that is good when you are under duress. And you have either to be killed or to worship idols. But if you can just escape, ולברוח מתחת יד המלך הרשע, and to run away from the hand of this evil king, ואינו עושה, and you are not doing that, הנהו ככלב שב על קיאו. We are eating here, so I would not repeat the metaphor, but it's not a nice metaphor. Those of you that are dog owners may know the scene. והוא נקרא עובד עבודת כוכבים במזיד. רמב"ם says, someone like that, that is able to run away and is not doing so, he is considered as an idol worshipper by will, not forced anymore, because you could leave. והוא נטרד מן העולם הבא, he would lose his share in the world to come, ויורד למדרגה התחתונה של גיהינום. By the way, Rambam himself and his family ran away from Spain, which back then was not controlled by the Christians, but by extreme Muslims, also that were trying to convert the Jews to Islam, and Rambam and his family ran away. Now, Islam is less severe than Christianity because they do not bow down to idols. So, and even so, Rambam thought that you must run away. All the more so when you speak about Catholic Christianity. So that is the situation. Do you remember last shiur, right? And one of the stages is the shock. When Moshe Rabbeinu shatters the luchot, when suddenly everyone understands that there is an egel standing in the midst of the camp. And the people, mostly have the writings of those that left Spain. It's almost, you can compare it. They are leaving Spain and they ask themselves how it came to be that we woke up one day and we have this beautiful and powerful and so spiritually engaged Spanish Jewry, and we wake up one day, it's not one day, it's 100 years, but one day, and there is a golden calf. How did we reach this bottom? And there are different answers, different as you can imagine. However, I think 3 answers are very common. One answer is people that do not like, the rabbis that did not like philosophy, blamed everything more or less on philosophy. They said philosophy caused, if you contrast Ashkenazic Jewry and Spanish Jewry, what was the greatest difference? The openness to philosophy, to Gentile philosophy. By being open to Gentile philosophy, that was the claim, people lost their adherence to the Jewish faith because they saw, yeah, Gentile can also produce very good philosophy, and philosophy is, according to their belief, philosophy was something that can maybe even grant you Olam Haba, and if not so, at least it can grant you success, spiritual success. So philosophy is to be blamed. Many others blamed the higher classes of the Jewish society, because these were the ones that everyone looked up to for guidance, but these people, not necessarily because of philosophy, but because they were assimilated. Now, when I say assimilated, I do not mean assimilated in the sense, unfortunately, we meet nowadays, which is even worse, but they were clothed like the Spanish nobility, they were speaking like them, they were thinking like them, so they were Jews, and maybe they were even keeping mitzvot to some extent or the other, but they were so much Spanish that it was easy for them to cross the fence into the other side. That was the other big blame that was put. The third one, which the third big one was the machlokot, meaning the disputes among the Jewish people, which I guess is always there. But another one that was given by Rabbi Shlomo Elami, who wrote a whole letter about what he thinks are the causes for, again, for this failure, as they saw it in the test of faith. And he says the reason is, he was a darshan, says the reason is that when the darshanim gave the drashot, people were not listening. says people were speaking in shuls, and also the salary was not enough. It's a very interesting.
You can relate.
Yeah, so they say, he says, you know, no, we are laughing, but he was writing, obviously he was writing from the blood of his heart, because he was feeling that he was doing his best in order to educate the people, and they were not listening to him, and everything fell apart. That was his, and so he felt, I guess, again, if we try to compare it, think about Moshe Rabbeinu being told by Hashem in his last day on earth that Am Yisrael, after entering the land, would also worship idols. Right, and that's what you look at the last parshiot of Dvarim, and that's this feeling of I did my best, I gave everything I could, but the people, you can bring the horses to the water, but you cannot make them drink. So this feeling was very, very strong among many of the rabbis that now felt themselves fleeing away from Spain, but their communities did not follow. They followed the rich, they followed the educated, they follow the enlightened, they follow the money, they follow what was easy. Now again, I'm already judging, but I'm trying to reflect upon the way that these Spanish rabbis and darshanim who had left us the writings, how they related to what happened. Years began to pass. In the beginning, the new Christians were not allowed to leave Spain or Portugal. But after some time passed, then they were allowed to go for business journeys. And later, maybe 100 years later or 200 years later, they were even just allowed to move out. There was still an inquisition, but if you moved out, you moved out. Nonetheless, the vast majority of these new Christian crypto Jews, conversos, maranos, Anusim, did not leave Spain or Portugal. That's just maybe the sad truth or the hard fact, but this is not disputed. Vast majority, even when they were granted the ability to leave, they chose to stay. Now, again, it is unfair for us to judge them. In our modern times, it's much easier to relocate yourself. It cannot be compared. Nonetheless, the feeling of alienation from these Jews that are able to live and nonetheless they remain was growing. And we may say that there were three approaches that were developed among the halachic decisors, among the authorities, among the rabbis, regarding these Jews in Spain and Portugal. One extreme approach was the approach of some of the Turkish rabbis. So we can quote here Rabbi Chaim ben Benisti from the 17th century. So 17th century. We spoke about the 50th century. Now we spoke about the 17th century. Most of the Jews are still in Spain, and they would remain there to this day. And he is asked, what about, there were a few difficult questions. The most difficult questions were family issues. Can you marry one of these crypto Jews that finally had left Spain after 150 years and land in Turkey or in any other place? How do you need to, a giur completely convert her to Jewishness? Can you rely that she is still Jewish? If she is still Jewish, what exactly is her status? Were her parents married, not married, a mamzeret? What would be the exact family status? Very important questions. And Rabbi Chaim ben Benisti says, when people are coming from Spain or Portugal to here and they tell us that they are crypto Jews or whatever they want to tell us, we relate to them as goyim completely. If they want to live among us, they need to undergo a giur, a conversion. Now, it would be easy for them because they know something, maybe not, but there is a need for a whole conversion status. If they touch wine, the wine becomes asur. For all purposes, they are considered as non-Jews. Now, it doesn't give, Rabbi Chaim ben Menisi does not give the reasoning to the psika, but it seems that we can find the source to it in a tshuva by the Maharitatz. That is Rabbi Yom Tov Tzahalon. That was the rabbi of Rabbi Chaim ben Menisi, again in Turkey. And he explains, that's, if you want, it's in source Vav. I'm skipping many sources, but you have the page if you want to look it afterwards. So he says in source Vav, he says, הואיל ונשתקעו בזרותם שם 120 שנה. He says, we are already 120 years after 1492. ורובם ככולם אף על פי שיודעים שישראלים הם וכופרים בעבודה זרה. He has a very interesting fact. He says, most of the crypto Jews still know that they are Jews. And more than that, I know that most of them they know that Christianity is idol worshipping. And they are heretics in Christianity. Now, I do not know how we can know what the majority of these conversos were in Spain. What type of a survey can you make? Obviously, all of his information was biased because you're only meeting the people that left Spain and met him in Turkey. So I'm not sure how exactly he gathered this information. But nonetheless, let's continue. So he says, אף על פי שיודעים שישראלים הם וכופרים בעבודה זרה, מכל מקום כל איסורי תורה נעשה להם קייטר. He says, I know for sure, they do not observe any of the mitzvot. All of the prohibitions of Torah became as allowed to them. אם בחושבם שהם אנוסים בכך, maybe they think that they are forced not to keep the mitzvot, והסיבה לא להוריד דת משה ויהודית פן יהיה למאכולת אש. He says, they cannot even learn from Sefarim. Why? Because if they would try to keep halachic books, what would happen to the Sefarim? It would be banned. So there is no teaching anymore. No schools, no Jewish day schools, nothing. So how would they know anything? Even if they would be willing to observe, even if they would be willing to take the risk, and it's a life risk, to keep halacha, they do not know halacha. אם מפני שאין להם ידיעת בית רבם בנים יולדו, לא היה להם ממי ללמוד. So we already speak, it's 120 years, so it's second, third, fourth generation. And again, we can think about similar cases in recent history, in Russia or in other places in which Jewish knowledge was wiped out by the authorities. And it's amazing how in a very short time, you can completely erase national memory. This is amazing. We take for granted that we know so many things and we are able to transfer it to our children. But it doesn't take too much to wipe away this national memory. Not too much. Not as we think. So he says they do not know anything, and even, now it's said. He says, מקצתם מסרו עצמם בסכנה למול את עצמם. Some of them, they take the risk to undergo circumcision. Now, if they would be caught, and that's something that is very difficult to hide, and if you would be caught, you would be killed, you would be put to death, you and your family. And they took the risk. So these are real tzaddikim. However, he says they just do not know the halacha. And they think that while they are not allowed to marry non-Jews, that they know, also usually by the law of the state there, they were not allowed to marry real Christians. That was part of the paradox I spoke about earlier, that they wanted them to become Christians, but they didn't allow them to become Christians. So they put him to begin with in an impossible situation. However, even that they know that from halacha, from Torah perspective, also they are not allowed to marry non-Jews. They thought they are allowed to hold girlfriends, non-Jewish girlfriends, concubines, pilegesh. And if there would be children born from this bond, then they would raise them as Jews. And the outcome is, says the Maharitatz, that already 120 years later, we just cannot rely on anyone saying that he is Jewish. Not because we do not want. Some of them are, as I said, they are moser hanefesh. They are willing to risk their life. But what can we do? There are many non-Jews going around there thinking that they are Jews. And again, similarities can be found in many places. And so he says, we have no other choice but to say that they last their chazaka. How do you say chazaka? The assumption, the pre-assumption that they are Jews, unless they would prove otherwise. So if someone comes and tells me he's Jewish and he comes from a Jewish community, then I believe him. That was the situation in the Jewish world from ever. Not in the conversus communities, says the Maharitatz. We do not accept their Jewishness unless they would prove otherwise. And now, let us see how can someone prove that he's Jewish if he's coming from a place in which the first thing you do is destroy any document or any proof that would show that you're Jewish. Now, we would say to the Maharitatz, but that's very harsh. He would say, situation is tough. What can I do? That's the truth. On the complete extreme opposite stood none other than the hero that we begin with, that is the Rivash, Rabbi Yitzchak, before the Rivash, the Tashbetz, but who lived also, he was born in Spain, also came to Algiers, Rabbi Shimon ben Tzemach Duran. And he held, now I'm going back to the 50th century, he held that the conversos, not only that they are still should be looked as Jews, they didn't last this pre-assumption that they, not only that they are Jewish, that they are tzaddikim, he says. And then what he's saying is amazing. He says, however, why do they not leave? If they are such tzaddikim, as I assume every Jew is, why don't they leave Spain? So he says, maybe they have reasons. Maybe monetary reasons. Maybe they want to keep their children. Maybe they want to help their parents. And these may be valid reasons. You know what he says? Maybe these are unvalid reasons. But if they do not know it's unvalid reasons, if someone is mistaken, that does not make him into a Rasha, into a heretic. So we keep this status of a righteous Jew. And then he even goes one step further. Let's say that someone would come from Spain, and you tell me the only reason I didn't leave Spain is because I wanted my money. I knew it's asur, but I wanted my money. He says we have a rule in halacha. Ein adam mesim atzmo rasha. A person cannot call himself wicked. In order to name someone as wicked with halachic ramifications, you need external testimony. So you cannot call yourself wicked. And thus he says, people coming from Spain, you can marry them. They are considered Jews to everything and form. However, there was a problem with this position. It is a beautiful, meaning again, I'm not, obviously halachically, all of these are great people and great authorities. However, from a, we may say, hashkafic point of view, this is a beautiful hashkafa. It may remind us, maybe you remember Moshe Rabbeinu standing in front of Hashem and saying, if you delete these people from the book, let my name be deleted as well. Now, it doesn't say they do not worth, they don't deserve to be punished. They do. They did the egel. However, the story cannot continue. The Jews you do not have other actors here. So we need to continue with what we have. That is the Tashbetz, again, coming from that's how he himself says in the end, Israel afal pi shechata, a Jew, even that he committed a sin, Israelu am kedoshimu, he's a Jew and he's holy. However, there was a problem. What was the problem with this maximalist approach? If you really think that they are completely kosher, meaning not only that they are Jews, they are tzaddikim, we have a big problem. What is the big problem? The big problem is, let's say that a couple got married. And then, as happened many, many times, only the wife was able to run away. Maybe only the wife was willing to run away. Now you have the wife in Turkey or in Saloniki, in Greece, or wherever. She ends up in Algiers, and her husband is stuck in Spain. He's not going to send any get anytime. Many times, a couple would come together, but then the husband would die without children, and the husband have a brother, a converso in Spain. Now, let's see how you get a chalitza from this converso. And so there was a middle position. The middle position held by the Rivash, that is the hero that we saw, we've said, they are Jews. However, if they stayed in Spain when they were able to leave, they are Jews, but not in good standing. So they are pasul le'edut. They cannot give testimony. If they cannot give testimony, we have no witnesses for Kiddushin. No witnesses for Kiddushin. No Kiddushin. If we have no Kiddushin, no mamzerut, no aginut, no ibum, all of these problems are solved. The position of the Rivash was accepted lehalacha by the Shulchan Aruch, meaning that the conversos are seen as Jews, however, as pasul le'edut, so no kiddushin and no ibum, at least if there is no way to attain a get or a chalitza. In Saloniki, as a matter of fact, there was a takana that was issued by the Rabbanim of the city, and it was reaffirmed from time to time over centuries, stating that women coming from Spain or Portugal, even if they tell you that they were married in Spain, even if they tell you that they were married in a Jewish ceremony, I mean, they went to the church, they made a Goyish ceremony, and then they made a private ceremony at home, the woman is allowed to marry whoever she wants, even if she came with her husband. She is allowed to marry whoever she wants. Why? Because that was the way that they understood the position of these conversos. Okay. So, where does that leave us? As I said, my goal in this shiurim is not only to speak about the historical events, but also with the question of not only the individuals coming from here to there and how they would be accepted, but how was the national view on these people trying to do tshuva, and also how did they see themselves as groups? And as a matter of fact, up till now, we spoke about individuals coming, or 45 people coming to Algiers. These are individuals. As time went on, whole communities were established. In Venice, in Livorno, and the most famous one maybe in Amsterdam. Portuguese community, also in the New World, in South America, and later in North America. When we speak about Portuguese shuls, what we mean by that is almost always, I mean, there were in Portugal, there were no Jews that were not conversos. It did not, after 1507, it didn't exist. There were no such Jews. So if we speak about Portuguese shuls, we speak about Portuguese of people that were conversos and came back to open Jewishness. There were many challenges to that. First, there was the simple question of people wanted to keep contact with Spain because usually many people here, lehavdil, they make aliyah, but still they keep economic ties with their place of origin, which makes sense. Many people left Spain, but they still kept economic, many times family ties or friendships. So they cannot just reappear as Jews, because when they would travel back to Spain in order to do business there, they need to still be known. The Inquisition can still catch them. The communities did their best in order to prevent their congregations, their members, from going back to Spain. including punishment such as if you went back to Spain, because we know that when you went back to Spain, you would eat non-kosher and you'd go to the church. So if you go back to Spain, you would not get aliyah for 3 years. I'm not sure how well did that work, but that was one way in some of the communities. In others, there were also economical punishments. The harshest that I saw was that you cannot get Yerusha if you go back to Spain. So you lose, you went because you wanted money. Usually, you would lose the heritage that is going through the rabbinical court in your community. Now, by the way, these communities were extremely strong, in many times much stronger than those of the Ashkenazic Jews. And that's very interesting. The historians suggest, and that's, I guess, quick of history, the reasons why it was so is because these Jews were very familiar and used for people spying on the religious observance. So it just seemed normal and natural to them that when they would establish communities, then the rabbis or the parnasim, or the ma'amad, as they were called, these were the rich riches, so they would be able to control the Jewish observance, the religious observance of the members, which is, I guess, as I said, an irony of history. So that was one challenge, but that was not the hardest. The hardest challenge was that these people were used, sometimes already for generations, to live in the seat and to do one thing and to aim for another. And, you know, again, if I'm trying to find a comparable notion, sometimes people came here, and some of them are still, usually from Eastern Europe. And they were used, that the state is something that is after you. It's something that you are trying to, I don't know, even not to steal from, but to keep from as much as you can. And not paying your taxes, for example, was considered in Romania, the places that the Jews came from, not paying your taxes to the Gentile government was seen as something which is completely fine if you just cannot get caught. Right? That's the only thing is don't get caught. But otherwise, I mean, they didn't see any moral problem because these were anti-Semitic governments that were pursuing the Jews. So why? What type of a moral obligation do I have towards such a government? It's very simple. However, after such a notion is taken and for generations, for hundreds of years, and then you come here and it's your own government, but you're still cheating in the taxes, but you're cheating yourself. Yes, but old habits die hard. Yes. And I guess the same happened there. So it was very difficult for them to, I mean, they were maybe used for people spying on them, but they were also very used to cheat on the spies. And things, many of them were not open, for example, for rabbinical authority, not real rabbinical authority. Again, for external control, yes, things should be very ordered. Law and order should be everywhere. That's Portuguese. That's law and order, for sure. But you wouldn't tell me what to think. For hundreds of years, the reason why I remained Jewish was because they didn't let anyone to tell me what to think. So now we'd go and some rabbi would stand in the pulpit and he would tell me what scriptures say. I know what scriptures say. You don't know what scriptures say. That was the attitude. And it was very difficult to get over it. And some very famous Jews were not able to. Maybe the most famous, of course, is Spinoza. He wouldn't be told by any rabbi how to think. And he himself, he attributes his, you may call it original thinking, or you can call it heresy, and obviously it's both. He himself attributes it to the fact that he was a converso, marano, or a crypto. So he's crypto. He's used to live as a crypto. It's part of religion, to be crypted. That was very, very difficult to pass. Also, what measures should be taken as tshuva? That's a great question. When someone makes such a great shift, change in life. So up till now, he was in Spain, he was going to the church, he was going to the cross, he was everything, eating non-kosher, everything. And now he changed his life. And he went to Amsterdam or to Livorno or to Venice, it becomes beautiful. Should he make tshuva for what he did in Spain and his fathers for I don't know how many generations? Should he fast every, let's say, Monday and Thursday? We know it was a common practice. People felt they need to atone for hundreds of years. And that's rabbis gave different answers, depending on which was the rabbi that was asked. How do you need to atone? Or maybe just going back in itself, that's atoning for everything. Should you completely depart, forget your past identity? Or should you keep it with you in some sense, shape, or form? Major questions of individuals, of psychology of individuals, but also of whole communities. Should this community say we were wrong up till now, and now we accept completely what the Ashkenazic brothers or Mizrahi, right, brothers say to us? They were very far from that. They were very proud, most of them were very proud of their origin. We are the people that kept the flame going. And we will not be taught, by the way, and they were modern. Of course they were modern. So they were modern, they were enlightened, they were, it's before enlightenment, but they were renaissanced. They were schooled. They knew philosophy, they knew Latin, they knew. They were educated in the best universities in Spain, which was a powerhouse. So usually they would not get their orders from Ashkenazis, which was very difficult because they had to find their own way. But also, and we would end with that note, I think that in many senses, it's what we call that the one that is chozer b'tshuva is on a higher madriga in some aspects than someone who never sinned. I just say, במקום שבעלי תשובה עומדים, אין צדיקים גמורים יכולים לעמוד. Where the בעל תשובה stands, it's higher than where the tzaddik gamur, the one that never sinned, stands. And that's because his experience in life, if he does not completely detach himself, the Baal Tshuva, from his experience, and here we speak not about one or two Baal Tshuva, we speak about thousands, dozens of thousands. Unfortunately, as I said, the vast majority never left. But still, dozens of thousands of people were coming out and returning to Judaism, and they brought things with them. And if we try, and we spoke about a few things, it's devotion to Mikra, which because that was the only thing they had. So suddenly Pirushim, commentary to the Bible, to the Mikra, re-emerge. And it's enough if we would mention here Rabbi Menashe ben Israel, that wrote The Conciliator, which is a book that you can find in English translation for free in the internet. And his job is he's looking in different contradictions in the Tanakh. And he is giving you all of the approaches that were given to solve them. So you can see how someone that was a converser, and he's troubled by the contradictions in the Tanakh, not in the Talmud, in the Tanakh, right? Because this is the book that they had. So we can speak about surface of Tanakh learning. But what is most important, I think, that they brought with them was the understanding of Jewishness as a nation thing, not only as a religious identity. Because if you are Ashkenazic or from Edot HaMizrach, then for you, the focus of Jewishness was about your religion. But if you lived in Spain after 200 or 300 years of being crypto-Jew, what did remain from the religion? A ceremony of lighting candles on Friday, and maybe Yom Kippur you would fast. Not much more than that. Not much more than that. But you knew, you were told when you were 12, if you were a girl, or 13, or if you were a boy, you were told you are a Jew. And that was the most important fact of your identity.
that was interesting appeared in Russia as well.
As well. Yeah, there, I think.
Government kept.
Exactly. Also in Spain, because as I said, the new Christians were always new Christians. It was very difficult to become old Christian, even after 300 years. And so their identity was focused around them as a nation. As a matter of fact, the people living in Portugal and establishing all of this community, they call themselves the nation. That's the way that they call themselves. Ha'uma, the nation. And I believe, it's not only me, I read it in the history books, they say that that is part of what gave the push, the birth of re-understanding. Jewishness is always a mixture of nationality and the religion. No one, at least almost no one, argues about that. But the focus changed and shift. And they were the ones to reintroduce the focus of Jewishness as nationality. And by that, they opened the door to what later became Zionism, and to a great extent, what can unite us now when we sit in this state with Jews that observe completely, observe half of the mitzvot, not observing any of the mitzvot, but we understand themselves as a nation. So I do not say there is an immediate link, but as they open the door to such a thought, even to conceptualize Jewishness in such a way, and in that sense we can say that במקום שבעלי תשובה עומדים, אפילו צדיקים גמורים לא יכולים לעמוד. So with that we conclude, obviously everything we spoke today is only very, very terse remarks on a huge and extremely interesting subject. I said the whole night reading. It's not literally, because it's fascinating, and we only touched the tip of the iceberg. I recommend everyone that wants to read more. There are the classic books, such the books of Cecil Roth about the Marranos. That's 100 years old, but it's still being referenced to, and many, many other newer books that were written by Yitzhak Ber, by the father of Benjamin Netanyahu, and by many others. Just do your own research, and I think that we have a lot to learn from the way that these people were able to converse their Yahadut, and later to keep, not only to keep the flame going, but to reignite it from what it seemed to be completely wiped out ashes. So thank you, and I hope that we would meet again, Be'ezrat Hashem, next week.
It's interesting to notice that the descendants like Amsterdam, Livorno, Venice, maybe